All right. What's going on, everyone? This is Alex, USA Days. So today we're doing a little conversation about what they don't teach you during QA Bootcamp. I'm here with Lana, and
Yeah,
she has her own channel. So this video will be split in two parts: part one on my channel, part two on her channel. But both of us, we are teachers in a boot camp, and we kind of see inside out what's happening, and we also work in QA, so full time. So I think there's something that is not being told in QA boot camps. Some things that are maybe not obvious until you actually start working in the field. One of the examples that I would like to start with is actually many places you're going to work with. They will lack documentation. So even though there's a lot of talk about documentation and how is everything should be documented properly, even in Agile, the process and everything, but then you will join the place and you will see there is no documentation or very limited, or there's that one person that knows everything and you have to go to them and ask. So at some point, you will actually get to a place where you start creating documentation when you join the place just because you want to have some stability and process in place. Yeah.
that's actually sounds like a very, very common problem, especially for startups. That's for sure. One thing to add here is actually there are sometimes places where they have documentation. In fact, they can have like a lot of documentation. But another problem is that documentation is obsolete. It's just not updated at all. And then, in my opinion, sometimes it's even worse than actually not having documentation because you actually use documentation that they have, and it's just wrong. So you look at the designs, they have like certain buttons or certain styling, and then you look at the interface, it's different. You start like hesitating and thinking, are those bugs or like should I
Right.
file them? But actually, no. But they just changed the flow. They didn't update the design, and as a result, this is what we see. So yeah, that could be super confusing, and especially if you're new in this industry, you just need to find the right people and start asking questions that just
Yeah.
challenging.
Especially outdated documents about joining the team and setting up the environment. When you try to configure like VPN or something, go through the steps to connect to corporate network, nothing works. Like, what is this?
Yeah,
So,
that's my favorite.
yeah. Um, Another thing that not obvious, but when you join startups, many times you will have no processes at all. So, or especially if you're like the first QA, there will be no, they will expect you to build it. If there's a small QA team, there might be some process in place, but if, let's say, if there are multiple teams, from one team to another, they will be using different tools, different process of filing bugs, when to file bugs, how to send a ticket back. So, lack of process also is something, through boot camps, we normally teach how the flow goes and what kind of approaches into development there are, like agile, scrum, or like waterfall. But on the actual job, there's somewhat of a mix, like always, of different things, and the processes are lacking many times. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with this one for sure. One situation I actually had in the past was very similar. I joined a company as a QA engineer, and they didn't have any QAs before me. So they tried to set up the processes. So they literally were like, well, you have to tell us what the process is going to be. So imagine someone who doesn't have experience, or like has a very small experience, maybe like working in a company where everything is set up. You just don't know how to approach it. And another fun thing was like they actually never used the Jira. So I had Jira on my resume, and they were like, "Oh, we are going to make you Jira admin. How about you set up Jira for us?" And I'm like, "Okay, it sounds a little bit challenging. I need to look into that." But actually, I did set it up. I figured it out. I had to watch a lot of videos on YouTube for that. But that's something that may happen, and unfortunately, sometimes this is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't realize, like, if you have Jira on resume, that means that you used it as a QA
Yeah.
engineer. So you opened bugs, you moved tickets around. You actually did not create a board for the project. That's more of like a project manager's responsibility. So setting up everything from scratch, I mean, yes, you can do it and you can search about it, but it's definitely out of the scope for like QA,
Exactly.
for QA.
Yep.
Yeah. Another thing that I find frustrating in startups, not so sure about bigger companies, but there's a lot of context switching. So they might start working on some features that will get canceled. So like you feel like that you worked on stuff and work just went in vain. um, they might throw you from team to team, or they might switch tools and try to figure out, hey, are we going to use Postgres, or maybe, okay, for API let's do Postman. Well, Postman not working really well, let's maybe do rest assure. And they're like, can you switch from JavaScript to Python to Java? And you're like, hey, can I just test? Can I work on testing? Can we stop? And it's very demotivating. Yeah.
For sure. Another thing, it happens with automation. And if that happens with automation, honestly, that's even worse because like I have a lot of students who complain that they joined a company, they were building framework in like one language, they were using, I don't know, Selenium, for example, and then they have a new QA manager, and this new QA manager, what's funny, sometimes they're like absolutely manual QA managers. They now want a different framework just because they heard that this is more efficient. Sometimes they don't even have any reasoning behind. And if these managers don't listen to automation engineers they have on the team, and they like just try to promote some JavaScript framework they just learn about to show that, hey, we've implemented something new, we've delivered something as a manager, that's just very frustrating for automation. Because imagine you like create this code for like 1 year, this is your baby, you literally know everything, you have some test cases, and then someone comes over and they're like, no, we're not going to use it, we're gonna move to something else. It's good if they at least ask you like to try some tool and then see the result, but sometimes people just don't do it, and they're like, okay, we want to switch, and then you have to find a way, and no one sometimes even cares that like you don't speak JavaScript, you only wrote test automation in Python before, so you actually have to do some learning there as well. Yeah, that could be very frustrating. And actually, just to be fair, when I join companies as QA automation engineer, sometimes if there are like previous automation written before me, sometimes I don't actually use it. Sometimes I rewrite it if I just don't like what's written there. And not gonna lie, every time I leave a company, I think like, what's gonna happen to my code? Will someone just get rid of all of it and write something of their own? That's possible. But yeah, that could be very frustrating, especially if you've been building that for years.
Yeah. And the thing is, with most of the startups, like they have this idea that, backlog is never empty. And that means for developers and QA. So if it does make sense for developers because there are new features in pipeline, for QA, sometimes they just create things to do because we know we need to have something in backlog. So we have to have a goal to push towards something. Not necessarily like, so if you have a stable testing, I think the priority should be on maintaining it and maybe adding new stuff, but not switching from framework to framework because, hey, there's this new thing and everyone talks about it, let's give it a try.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Also, something that I talk with students a lot, and not a lot of people realize, it can be really hard to find a new job. Like if you're just joining the field, even though it's a lot easier to become tester than a programmer, you still have to know some tools, and you have to also build your skill of going through interviews because it is a process. It's not just, hey, here's my resume and we're going to hire you. We need a tester. They will talk to you. They need to like you. So even in this market, and this market is pretty good, a lot of companies are hiring, you can still spend around 3 months of active searching. And when I'm talking about active search, I'm not saying like, hey, I'm going to send one resume a week. I'm talking about applying 10 times a day to different places and keeping track where you applied, and sometimes tailoring your resumes towards the company that you're going. Like, hey, they want JavaScript. I know JavaScript better, so I'm going to highlight it. Or they want Python. Okay, let me work on my Python skills, and then I'm going to highlight it that I have Python. I put it first in my resume. I'm not saying cooking your resume. I'm not saying lying on the resume, but I'm saying, making sure that whatever the company wants, it's more visible for them when you send the resume. So it's not as easy. Yeah, it takes time to join, especially if you're doing it for the first time, finding a new job.
This one is actually interesting. I honestly, I've always believed that it will take at least 3-4 months to get a job in manual QA. With automation, I feel like it's a little bit different because there are just more jobs, and sometimes if you have the right skill set, it's just easier. But with manual, there are a lot of competition on the market, and I've always thought that it's going to be around like 3-4 months. But I recently started to talk to some students who actually took way longer than that. So, for example, I had a student who told me that they've been searching for a year before they landed the manual position. I obviously don't know the details, right? If they were sending like one resume per day, that's explainable. But I noticed that a lot of manual positions these days ask for like more and more technical things. And then if they see a person who actually doesn't have like a lot of technical skills on their resume, like they don't have Postman, I don't know, basic Python, Selenium, whatever, they sometimes just like give preferences to other resumes. And even if they don't ask for automation, I feel like internally when they pick resumes and look through resumes, if they see someone with at least a little bit of automation background, they kind of start leaning towards those candidates a little bit. I mean, for the same money, they can get someone who has a little more skills. And that's why I feel like it's becoming a little bit worse. And then another thing that I think Boris mentioned in here is that our market actually is different depending on like the whole situation. So right now we have a lot of companies who have like hiring freezes, a lot of companies laying off people. And obviously, if you're new to this market, it's much harder for you because now instead of competing with other like bunch of new people that we usually see on the market, you are competing with people who got laid off from LinkedIn, from Coinbase, from Tesla, and they have those huge companies on their resumes. So obviously, they will probably get jobs first. So your waiting time is increasing. And that's something that unfortunately we can't predict at all, right? You can do your best, but if something happens to the market the way it happened right now, that's the case, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the market does change. It fluctuates depending on the time of the year. There are like hiring periods, and then there are like years when there's less quiet on the job market.
Yeah. From your experience, what would you say like the best period? I noticed that it's like towards Christmas, I think.
Yeah, I
Usually.
think so. When the new budget is in place, so like, or they get in the new hires, so like end of the year or the start of the year, close to the Christmas, and there is also a period when the college students go back to college, and then they have like their internship in the summer, so they might hire interns. But then when interns are back to school, so you have to kind of start actually filling those positions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, okay. So one thing also around QA and boot camps specifically. So people often think that they're going to join a boot camp, they're going to go through boot camp, and that's it. They know QA. And I think like any IT company, any IT job that has this kind of tools that always change, the languages that always changes, things changing on and off. There's something that you use today may be outdated tomorrow. It's going to be the same thing. Doesn't matter if you're a programmer, if you're a QA, if you're maybe even if you're like in tech support. I never worked in tech support, but I just assume if the things keeps on changing, you have to keep on learning. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to go take this boot camp, now I'm a QA professional, I'm going to know it. No, the learning just starts. And I know some people that take several boot camps because there's always things they have to learn. Also, you need to keep in mind you can't learn everything. So at some point you need to change your focus to, okay, I need to master this tool. I know it's popular, like Postman, or I need to master Python and automation with Python. So I'm just gonna focus on one tool. But as soon as you find a job, you still you're still learning. It never stops. So 10 years after being in industry, I know now for the fact, even in my own company where I work, if I'll be switched from one project to another, I'll still have to figure out in the other project what tools are they using, how they test things, and I'll still have to learn things. So even with 10 years of experience. So yeah, it never stops.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the most common mistake for people who are like totally new to the industry. So people who have like had maybe like few jobs, they usually get it. But people who are absolutely new, for them, I feel like this is a totally different experience. Many folks are from other industries, right? So there it's different. There they just like go learn something, they know like the main things, and it's usually fine. Like, yeah, sometimes maybe they take like some additional training, but that's pretty much it. So in tech, it's really different because things actually change and things change a lot. So if you don't adapt to what you see on the market, things are not going to go well for you. So one thing that I actually tell students when they start searching for jobs is like, you go through interview process. When they ask you a question that you don't know, please write that question down. And then before the next interview, just take some time, look up this question and try to actually find and understand the answer. Not just learn it by heart, but actually try to understand what they are trying to say. And then always just like keep track of what they're asking. So for example, when I was looking for my one of my first manual positions, they were asking a lot of questions about like client server communication and like some API related questions. And back then, I actually didn't really know that stuff. So I started to Google that. I tried to learn that. Then some companies were asking me questions about Git. So I learned how to like grab some code from GitHub in case I need to use it. Just the basic things. But when you have those basic things, at least you can answer some questions. And then that will give you an idea of like which tools are popular. So if you interview with a lot of companies, yes, they all will probably use different tools, but there's something in common sometimes. So you can just find those pieces, concentrate and try learning them. And then for those who've been in the industry for a while, same thing, just try to learn new technology. Like, I honestly, I feel a little bit bad for people who were using like some old automation tools, like before Selenium. I think it was like HP or something like that. Like the current market, there are just not that many roles that need that tool anymore, right? Currently, we use Selenium or Cypress or something like that. And we have people in the industry who have like 10, 15 years of automation experience, and they can't get any automation job just because they never done this kind of coding. They don't know how to pass coding challenges. They don't know anything about Selenium. And like, what are you going to do? Like now, when you've been working for so many years, learning like something new absolutely from scratch is a little bit hard. So try to do it at least a little bit while you are working and just take some time.
Yeah, I think learning is like a job after the job. You have to spend, a couple nights every week to dig into new tools and kind of figure them out. Yeah.
Some companies are fine with it though, right? Some companies may like give you some time for that, or actually in many companies where I work, they had like some budget. So yeah, you will be doing that like job after job, but at least they will pay for your course. So this is something that may happen. So like find out if the company you work for has this kind of perks, and maybe you can at least get compensated for taking some extra classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Another point that I want to talk about, that some students think that they're gonna join as a QA, and then they will be told what to do. The company knows what needs to be done, what needs to be tested, how to be tested, but it's not the case. Actually, a lot of times you will be asked to do something that they have no idea how to do, and you have no idea how to do. So the research, I think, is the main component of working in testing. Like 50% of your job will be around figuring things out by yourself. Yeah.
It's good if they ask you about something that actually makes sense too.
Right.
Sometimes there could be a situation when they don't really like know what they really want, so they try to ask you to find some sort of solution, and then it's very hard to satisfy everyone, especially if like QA managers have one expectations, developers have another expectation. It probably goes a little bit more towards automation and like what to expect from automation, but that could be also like pretty frustrating. Yeah, research, Google definitely will help. But especially if you're like the only QA in the company, like basically prepare for the situations that you just won't know like what exactly to do in a certain situation, and you will just need to try to find information yourself and implement the best solution to your knowledge. That's it.
Yeah.
Like one thing I do actually, I try to like if I'm building something automation related, I try to like prototype it and show it to managers and kind of like get their understanding, like, is this what you wanted? At least. And that helps. And that goes to like some other tools, or like maybe if you're asked to implement test case management system and you picked a certain tool and try to implement it, like show it to the manager halfway through. So at least like do this sanity check to make sure that you're building the right thing and like capture their requirements a little bit better. That's the key.
Yeah, definitely.